Hello, everyone. It is my great pleasure today to have Kevin Bell as our guest. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about how Kaizen can be applied in the process industry. More specifically, how there was a very successful project at Renewi Elwa, one of the key partners to the public sector in the processing of municipal waste. And first and foremost, I would like to introduce Kevin Bell. He's the contract director at Elwa. And myself, my name is Luis Godinho, and I work at Kaizen Institute. So I welcome everyone, and it's a pleasure to have everyone here. I would like so people get to know a little bit more about Renewi, and they understand a little bit what Renewi does and the the size of the organization. Kevin, I would like to ask you if you could share some key figures about Renewi.
Yes, no problem. Thanks for inviting me, Luis. It's great to be here with you today. Obviously, we've worked together on a couple of big projects now, but specifically, we just talk about the one in the waste industry specifically. So, some key figures about Renewi. Renewi has 4 divisions. I work in one of the divisions, which is the municipal division, which represents around 11% of the group's revenue. From the contract I manage specifically, it's in the East London Waste Authority. So basically, we handle 450,000 tonne input waste from the East London 4 constituent councils. Operating on a PFI contract, which specifically started in 2002, runs for 25 years till 2027. So Renewi Municipal runs 5 municipal contracts across the UK at this moment in time and process around 1.3 million tonnes per annum. Obviously, due to changes in the market, some of the municipal divisions are running at a loss at this moment in time. We'll probably talk about that specifically later. From my own contract, I run 2 very large processing sites called mechanical biological treatment facilities, and I also run 4 household waste recycling centres and 1 material recycling facility, which services the contract specifically. They have the capacity to the 2 big sites to process around 360,000 tonnes of waste per annum. And like we said specifically, we move around 450,000 tonne of that waste. We do divert from landfill 99.95% of that total volume. That was a change we actually implemented at the start of my tenure, which was in September 2018.
Now, Kevin, you have started to implement a Kaizen transformation at Elwa, the contract that you manage, about 2 years ago, and yep. I wanted to share a little bit with everyone that is joining us today. What were the main reasons for you to start this journey with Renewi? What drove you, or what motivated you to start this change at the Elwa sites?
Of course. Well, in the municipal waste business, there's been some significant changes over the last decade through legislation, taxation, and obviously a target to eliminate waste sent to landfill. The East London Waste Authority operating contract specifically was losing around £3.8 million per annum. That was at the start. So, joining the business, quite a big opportunity to do something different, shall we say, when you've got that amount of loss per annum. So from my viewpoint, we had to set about doing a cultural change. I wanted to make the East London Waste Authority specific contract. The contract had been running since 2002. So there was a resistance to change to the organisation, historically linked to the public sector. They'd done specific continuous improvement projects in the past that had not worked. So there was a slight scepticism there amongst the workforce. So we obviously started this process out by the fact of communicating that we just need to get back to basics, get to do what we're doing well, and have the right person doing the right thing at the right time.
I have to say, one of the things that I appreciated as well in the work that we have done together is that the message was very clear, and we had these very clear mottos to set the message and have clarity in the communication. So also for those people that maybe don't know much about the municipal waste industry, I would like to ask you if you to just share in very general terms how the municipal waste is actually processed at the Elwa sites, and what are the key steps and metrics that you look at and that drove also this transformation.
Absolutely. A very brief explanation of the process. For the two big MBT, mechanical biological treatment sites, basically you have a lot of black bag waste that you deal with every day on a day by day basis from we as consumers, members of the public. That typically comes in through a dust cart that's picked up at curbside. Once that's picked up, it comes into our facility, goes over a weigh bridge where it's weighed in to see how much waste and volume's in there. Once it's been weighed in, it typically goes into a whole host of doors that we've got on the MBT facility where there's reception pits. So basically your dust cart will tip into a reception pit. From the reception pit, a big crane will come up, pick some of the waste up out the reception pit, put it into a big shredder, and that material's then shredded down to around 300 millimeters. Once it's shredded, it goes into another section from pre-shredding to post-shredding, and then it goes into a drying hall where typically it's put into strips. From each of the strips, we actually assign date ranges for each of the strips so we can tell when we've put the material in there. Then typically the material stays in there for around 10 to 14 days to dry. During that process time, we lose around 30% of the moisture, so all the water that goes out of that. So once that's dried out, it's then picked up by a crane again and then put onto other conveyor belts and put into the refinement section. In the refinement section, we separate materials out into metal, into ferrous and non-ferrous metals. We take glass out of there. It goes on all the system conveyor belts. We take out stone. We take out organic fines. And what is left from all that material then is called refuse-derived fuel, or typically RDF in this industry is an acronym. Once we've done that, that RDF then is compacted, it's taken out, compacted into a baler. From the baler, it's shipped off to an energy to waste facility where obviously that gets burned then and then generates electricity for a whole host of households depending on where that goes. The rest of the offtake materials from the rest of the 450,000 tonne we bring in per annum goes via multiple destinations to different hauliers, different destinations, so plastics recycling, metal recyclers, to enhance the circular economy. So there's a big separation of waste done at some of the smaller sections and the transfer sections of our site as well, where we do a whole host of recycling, trying to extract as many materials out as we can to enhance the circular economy, so it goes to its final destination. So if it's cardboard, it goes to a cardboard recycler, and therefore we keep that loop going round so we're not sending anything to landfill in respect.
I have to say that Renewi to me is one of the companies that is closest to the concept of circular economy nowadays, and it's interesting to see the different technologies and innovation that goes into the segregation of materials to actually make this happen. Mm-hmm. But I know that the project that was done was not only focused on the improvement of existing processes. There was also, like you mentioned, a challenge or the requirement to change a little bit the daily management and the routines, the culture of the business. So would you be able to elaborate a little bit more on what process changes have been achieved?
Yeah, of course. And this was a really big project, as we said before, losing £3.8 million per annum. There's a big opportunity there to gain some control back, some process control that can reduce the cost base. So when we first started to do this, we were looking at individual projects, but we decided, obviously working with the Kaizen Institute, that we just look at the entire process flow through the entire system. So right from the start of the process, when the material comes in through the weigh bridge, right to the end of the process where it leaves via the weigh bridge. So everything in between was mapped out. We did a complete mapping exercise from one end to the other. And during that process, we actually highlighted 32 individual projects to enable a different kind of transformation program. An amazing amount of projects when you think of it. So some of the changes that we managed, so to give us some specific examples, we changed the maintenance and engineering section. So the way we store and manage spare parts, looking at improving the visibility of what stock we have, where we have it and when we need it. So we're looking at consumption based on individual parts. We looked at rationalization and maintenance spend on both spare parts and service providers because we were spending too much money where we didn't need to. We were storing more items than we need to. It's just about having the right things in the right place at the right time. We also reviewed frequency of maintenance activities, associated work standards and their duration. We introduced specifically tablets to the engineers and maintenance technicians for them to be able to access information where they need it and when they need it. So rather than coming back, walking all the way back, because these are big facilities, right the way back to the engineering stores, back onto the computers, we provided them with tablets so they could actually access the information right at the destination that they needed it to speed up the process. What you're looking to do all the way through this is an ironic statement, is actually to cut out the waste of the people spending time doing things that add no value. We improved the cleaning routine. So it's not just about engineering, it's about how can we involve the operators in that. So we did a whole host of programs on autonomous maintenance, the operators themselves. So from the operators that are managing some of the equipment on a day-by-day basis, where they're not typically engineers and not trained as engineers, we provided them with some basic condition monitoring of equipment. So we train them up to understand some basic checks that they could do themselves, so they can maintain the equipment themselves and do some basic practices, which was really good, because what you got from that was the engagement of the operators, having that input to look after and control their machines. We did some innovative changes in refinement to improve recovery and separate the materials as well. And it was all looking at cutting all the waste out. So this mapping exercise, looking at where we weren't adding value and putting value back in. So taking that non-value added process activity out, which was hugely successful. Looking at the process flow right the way through the MBT facility, we changed crane missions, which we weren't utilizing the cranes properly from picking up the waste. We found different ways of doing that speeded the process up. When we speeded the process up, it created more uptime, which created more throughput, which allowed us to take more contract waste, which allowed us to make more commercial advantage. So huge activities that were taken in there, but they're just some activities that we identified during this process, like I said, from one end of the process right the way to the other.
And all of these activities were linked with each other, right? They had a sequence.
Absolutely.
Okay. The next question I would like to ask is, we had a plan for 32 activities, but things change. In a large project like this, market changes will happen, and then we have to adjust. I know that the project plan was for about 1 year period.
Yeah.
But even within 1 year, things can change. And especially this year with COVID, I think most organizations will relate to this as well, to this challenge. So I just wanted to ask you, how did you adjust or adapt to these changes?
Yeah, during the process, you're quite right, Luis. We had a major market change during that. So we ship all our refuse-derived fuel. When we started the contract, it was all shipped to the Netherlands. Now, unfortunately, the Netherlands, who are trying to really drive out taking out incineration in the Netherlands itself, they decided to put a tariff on, a tax on import tax onto refuse-derived fuel that was going into the Netherlands at the time. Because we were shipping so much waste into there, that meant that it put a massive impact on our baling activities. So we'd done a whole host of activities on one element of the machine, which is the baler. So we bale, as I've stated before, the refuse-derived fuel. And the work that we did with the Kaizen Institute, we managed to create more efficiency for that process. which drove the cost down, the unit cost down. So we'd taken the unit cost down per bale from from a region of £12.75 per tonne to nearly £8 per tonne. A huge difference there. But unfortunately, due to market changes, it meant that we couldn't, therefore, with the import tax, sustain that from a market viewpoint. So we had to look for other avenues. So the Kaizen Institute were great during that time because it just enabled us to focus on different activities that were adding value. So because we had to change the market, stop shipping as much to the Netherlands, we started shipping more within the UK and other destinations. And they worked with us to look at value-added activities that made sense from them activities. So we quickly adjusted the scope of ongoing activities to deliver more value-added changes.
Clear. Now, going back to what was mentioned regarding culture changes and improvements to daily management and routines, I just wanted to ask you to elaborate a little bit further how the day-to-day changed, how those changes were implemented as well, please.
Of course, this really wasn't an easy exercise. One of the major reasons behind it was because we'd had a cultural impact. Some of these people had been with the business for quite a few years, a little bit resistant to change, very skeptical of doing something different. So we had to convert a lot of these people into looking at what the opportunities were for them as individuals as well. We did a lot of improvements to the maintenance team management at the time. And unfortunately, we had to make some changes in the management team, which give us increased focus and enabled us to look at key performance indicators properly. An example of that, our control room in our MBT facility is a key part of how we manage the activities on all the sites. The previous existing daily management boards not been updated, not all the operators were following best practice. So we worked with the Kaizen Institute to put new team boards in place. We worked with the operators to put key metrics in place, key performance indicators. And not only that, but the operators themselves actually highlighted and updated the boards on a day-by-day basis, on a shift-by-shift basis. So we put shift meetings in place, reviewed them, adjusted them as necessary, yet again working with the operators. We put together a comprehensive training program with capability assessments that was already implemented as well, to making sure people knew the jobs that they were trying to undertake. And obviously we set some daily management standards to set up that enabled us to deliver regular standard audits, which were through the commission by, which is still done to this day themselves now. So just focusing on what you do well, making sure it adds value, and then making sure you set them as standards and they're consistently followed day in, day out, was one of the biggest successes. But yet, and not a very easy practice to do, helped entirely by the Kaizen Institute, because obviously you have to work with people who've done these methodologies before. As I've said, I've worked with the Kaizen Institute in my previous business to fantastic effect, where we changed over 500 people in a different culture there. So there's 211 people that work within the Elwa contract, half the volume of people, but yet again, you're still going through that cultural journey. So you need people alongside you that have experienced that and can help you and support your management team through that process. And that's something we did very, very well throughout the 18-month spell that we worked together.
In regards to the challenges that you raised, that there was resistance to change and that people, we needed to engage with them and get them on board. Would you mind sharing why do you think that is? Why do you think that happened, or what was driving this? Why this resistance to change?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And it's not something I've just seen specifically from this industry. It's something I've seen in multiple industries that I've worked in. This is my 10th different industry now. And so many times do companies try and implement continuous improvement and don't implement the right values correctly that engage with the operators. So they try and do it from very high level. they try and do a top-down approach, when realistically you must get the operators on board, the people who are doing the job on a day-by-day basis. And because it hadn't been implemented properly and failed in effect on the several occasions that they tried it in the past, it creates skepticism in the workforce. So when you're talking to the operators, when we were first trying to launch it, the first thing they're going to say to you is, we've tried this before, you know, we've done these things before, they'll last a few months and then it'll go away again. So what you're trying to show them is this is a real different change now. You're trying to create a very strong cultural transformation from firefighting to more of a control process. And because you're involving the operators within that process as well, and they're engaged and you're empowering them to be able to make the decisions, you get that buy-in, you get that autonomy, and they start getting more involved actually in the process. So it's easy to change mindsets over time, but it is a cultural change that does, unfortunately, it's not a quick process. It does take time to go through, but, you know, to answer your question, it is difficult to overcome when companies have tried several continuous improvement processes in the past. They haven't worked, and it creates that skepticism. But the only thing I can say, because of the success we have had, and especially in my last two businesses, working with the Kaizen Institute, it creates a different dynamic with the workforce. So as soon as they see that there's benefits there for them, it makes their jobs easier. They become more empowered. They start getting more involved, and then they actually come out with loads and loads more ideas.
Thank you for that. You mentioned several times the value that was delivered, and you mentioned several times that the engagement and the whole project delivered results as well. And like we like to say, okay, the proof is in the pudding, right? So what is the real? Would you mind sharing, just at a high level at least, what was the real impact of this project, and how did it help Renewi?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this for Renewi as well. If, you know, we were launching the CI again because obviously we'd done work with the Kaizen Institute in my previous business, launching it into a brand new business, and I'd managed to speak to the board and get them convinced that what I'd done previously with the Kaizen Institute we could equally do within this business. So they supported me. So this was a real pilot exercise for us in my contract, in the East London Waste Authority contract. As we said before, losing 3.8 million to show benefit, you know, and it's only as good as what you can say in the culture that you put together. So we made some fantastic, clear and significant improvements to operational costs. We made over £3 million in cost savings, of which 2 million are directly linked to the work that we delivered in the project, which was well over the initial expectations. I think we set out to target initially around 1.4 million, but to achieve over 3 million, it was quite significant. Not only just that, the payback to the project was delivered before it was even finished. You know, we had positive financial impact was achieved 2 months into the project itself. So we already started seeing some benefit very, very quickly because we were doing the right thing, going back to basics, training the people, engaging with them. We already started to see some initial benefits. But not only from that, from the work that we did together with the Kaizen Institute, we've managed to see similar savings even in the next year too as well. So we're still seeing another 1.5 to 2 million pound opportunity, would you believe, on top of the 3 million of benefit that we can still see, because we've created this continuous culture now where people are starting to think about the roles more. So now they're coming out with even more ideas, even more benefits. So this is enabling us to turn a loss-making business into a profit-making business, which is a real success.
But then with so much success, with so many benefits, my question would be now, what comes next? What's the next big challenge or change that you're going to do, that you're going to implement in Renewi? What's the stretch goals that we are trying to reach out for now?
Yeah, and it's yet again, continuous improvement is something that we do every single day. It doesn't stop. These people who think that we can just, we'll put a CI manager in, we'll bring a continuous improvement company in, like the Kaizen Institute, we'll do a project and then it stops. It never, ever stops. Continuous improvement is a culture. It's a way of life, so we keep stretching the teams now. And our stretch targets now is to deliver less than 1% unplanned downtime across the sites. It's to hit our recycling rates that we've never hit here for the duration of the contract in the amount of time that it's been put together since 2002. They've never hit their contractual target of 33% recycling. This year, we're already at 33% recycling. So that's 2 years into the project where we've done the continuous improvement. We've started to hit the recycling. Not only that, we have a project plan to hit 40% within the next 3 years. So we're stretching and we're pushing the boundaries and the standards because we've created this empowered culture of autonomy, and the operators, we're managing to push the targets to achieve things we probably thought we never could years ago. And it's fantastic to have that momentum, and it creates a completely different model and a working environment for people to work in.
The last question, I think we ask the last question, then we move on to the live questions anyway. So I'll just ask the last question. So now sustainability is of course often a question that comes up when we talk about continuous improvement. And we see that in your case, you're driving the targets to improve further and further and further. And now I'd like to ask one last question before we ask people who are joining us today to also ask questions or share with us what they would like to ask to you directly, Kevin. And my question would be, how do you think that all the changes that we implemented to date, how do you think that these solutions, these results, how are we going to make sure that this is now sustainable? And did you already find some initial challenges linked directly to the sustainability of what was implemented?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Again, sometimes you can make an initial impact, but it's that sustainability of the impact that's the real success here. And I can answer this in one of various ways. It's really important throughout the process that we engaged the people, every single person within the process. So we created an autonomy through daily Kaizen activities of empowering the employees to be able to have a voice and come to work and be able to make changes in their own working environment, that they were listened to, that they felt respected, and that they felt very important, that we look to them for opportunities to improve the process if need to be. So by doing that, we've managed to create a different culture. And because we've created a different culture of can-do and a can-do attitude, I believe that we'll sustain it. And it's a mentality that you had to have, and your management team has to have, where we're checking these things. So we have changed the work habits and routines, and we have defined and helped the escalation procedures through Komishibai and the help chain itself. So really important from our viewpoint that all the employees know that they can be supported, and like I said, they can be listened to. So if they have got a problem that they can't fix, they know we're going to listen to them, and they know we're going to support them and help them to resolve the problem together. So therefore, you create more motivation and more aligned teams where people are actually interacting better. So sustainability, I can only tell you from what we've done from when we worked with the Kaizen Institute, and now we're still creating the same amount of value and opportunity and cost benefit after that, because we've already created that culture and flow, which we just need to keep continuing. And it's up to myself and people as leaders and ourselves as leaders to keep pushing and engaging with the people and listening to the people to continue that journey, because as we've mentioned previously, continuous improvement never stops. It's a way of life. It's a culture.
Kevin, thank you very much for your very insightful and very, very detailed explanation on how this continuous improvement journey was for yourselves and for your team as well. And I would also like to now just start with a Q&A session, because we would also like to give the opportunity for people that are joining us to also hear about your experience, that they have the opportunity to ask you questions and take the most value as well from this session. So thank you. Okay, so I believe Kevin is having a little bit of a difficulty with a connection, with a Wi-Fi connection. So what I suggest that we do is I'll try to respond as best I can to some of these to some of the questions that are being shared with us. And what I would like, I see that there's a couple of questions here already online, and what I would like to try and provide an answer as best I can to the questions that are being shared. Hopefully, Kevin will be able to rejoin us in a couple of minutes once we figure out the problem with his connection. Okay, so there's a question that has been raised regarding the experience in after 2 years doing this improvement, and what would be different if we were to start again from day one. So how would we have approached this differently? So we actually have been discussing with Kevin how we can use what was done up until now to support and improve the activities moving forward. And what we have done is we started to create more robust structure and link to create more visibility of the results. So one thing that we've noticed at the beginning of the project is that there's a lot of KPIs that we initially started with that did not really create visibility of what was going on in the way that we wished they would. So there was a lot of work that was put into even throughout the project itself, changing the KPIs that people were looking at, and then to be able to make a stronger link between what actually is happening to what we see in the P&L and what we see in the accounts on a monthly basis. And then we started to move on towards looking at that on a week by week basis. So a lot of the KPIs that you will see that we see now have been changed and continue to be changed for us to have a more visibility and clarity on what was going on. So that is something that we've noticed throughout this project, that we were lacking. The data didn't show us what we actually wanted to see. So this is something that already started to be addressed in the meantime. There's a second question that already has been raised. That would be, wouldn't it be better to just send I assume the household waste, directly to an energy recovery facility? Now, there's this actually has to do with the quality of the fuel. There's actually some requirements that exist for the type of fuel that is used to recover the energy, and to some extent the just the fact that we have a lot of biological material and a lot of water, a lot of different caloric content in the waste might be a reason why we don't want to send the waste directly to an energy recovery facility. So one of the things that we do try to keep control of at the MBT facilities is that we have a controlled specs of the caloric content of the material that might be sent to an energy recovery site. So there's a separation that we do. A second aspect of this is that there's a lot of recycling benefits that we only can make possible by actually going through the processes that we do in the Alua sites, which allow us to, using centrifuge or using a couple of different systems to separate metal, stone, and glass, and non-ferrous metal as well. We are able to then promote recycling opportunities from this, which then means that we actually recover more value from the material that we process on site. Okay. Let me just check a couple more questions. Okay, so Gordon, I see that you asked another question regarding the resource or support that we've provided. So the way that we provide support typically is includes two things. First, we help to understand what would the scope would be in the very initial stage, and we had an initial conversation about what could we do to actually bridge the gap that we had in financial performance and also operational performance. So we have we helped the Renewi team, the management team, understand what could be done, what was the possibility, what was the aspiration that we could have to bridge the gap, and that's where Kevin also mentions the 1.4 million, and we took an initial approach of understanding, okay, how far can we stretch it, and what direction are we taking, and then during the implementation of the changes, the support that we provided I would also split it into two elements. There's one element which is analytics and expertise that we have, and the second element is also really helping the teams implement things live. We also we the way that we deliver the transformation also we help with the preparation of the change that is going to be delivered, and also during the implementation stage of the project, we help design the solution with the teams. So we bridge the gap from what we discussed initially in an assessment or planning phase to what is actually going to be delivered. And then in the implementation itself, we were there even on the day-to-day at 4 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, sometimes help coordinate the cleaning activities of specific pieces of kit, just because we wanted to make sure that the understanding that we had of how the asset should be running and how the standards should be managed, that we would hand this over directly to the shop floor team. So we help design the solution, and then we help implement, and we also help to be there to make sure that it was being followed and address any deviations that would come up. Okay, which KPIs helped? There's the next question from Peter. I see which KPIs help to identify the main root causes. Like I mentioned, throughout the transformation process, we actually noticed that there was a need to change the KPI structure, and this is something that that Kevin and I have discussed quite often, and also the link between financial KPIs and operational KPIs, how we could strengthen that link, and 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 um, and there's like I mentioned before, we completely transformed those KPIs to make them more meaningful for the teams at an operational level, and we also restructured a lot the KPIs to make them more meaningful, to link it back to the financial indicators of the business. So in most cases, we had to completely change the KPIs. The approach that we had throughout the whole process has been that every month we would make sure that we would look at the financial KPIs to try and go through this exercise of reconciling what we saw on the financial data versus what we saw on the operational data. And this is the suggestion that I would also give everyone, is that it's not enough to just look at operational data. We always need to look at both. And one key insight that we saw is that once we started to fine tune the KPIs, that we really should drive for short interval control to really drive the engagement between operators and management, and reinforce this regular communication and regular reaction between deviations and to the standard running targets. So another question that I see is, has the change in the final disposal location contributed to the financial improvement? Has moving the UK disposal saved you money, or are the savings exclusively linked to the process from Weybridge to Weybridge? So all of the benefits that we've mentioned that were directly associated with the project have been measured from Weybridge to Weybridge. So it was well over 2 million that were directly linked to this to Weybridge benefits.
the change that we had in a final disposal location was actually negatively contributed to the performance that we were hoping to achieve. So it was actually an obstacle more than something that enabled us to achieve greater financial benefits. We know that we would probably reach more if this change had not happened. Then I see from Simon L a question: how were the Kaizen team accepted into the Renewi team, into Renewi, and did they experience any resistance? I can tell you that it was not always easy. So what we saw is that there's an initial skepticism that the shop floor in general has, of course, to the change that we want to implement. And there's also skepticism because very often we are challenging current ways of thinking and paradigms. So what has happened is we felt the need to spend time on the shop floor, close to the operation, and help prove what we were actually proposing, to make sure that we would get the buy-in from operations. In general terms, what we have seen is that operators were quick to adjust and buy into the change. Where we often see difficulties in adjustment has been in middle management, because the challenge with middle management is suddenly in this type of programs, you have a lot of pressure on middle management to change the way of thinking and way of management. So we have done to also support this transformation, and help middle management through this journey, is we started to develop also standards as to what was expected, what was business as usual every day, so that they could understand what would become now a routine. So what do I check when I arrive to site? What are the things that I definitely need to check to make sure that everything is under control? So we used something that was shown already in the videos that were shared throughout this presentation. We used Kamishibai cards, simplified audit systems, to make sure that everything was being kept being tracked, and everything was under control, and that it was very visual to understand. Okay, red, green, is it okay? Is it not okay? Regarding circular economy and transforming waste into new products, what's the importance of collaboration with other players in the supply chain? Do you have any example of a project? Okay, this is a very interesting topic. This is a topic that it's becoming more and more relevant for business and for Renewi, for the waste recovery business. And it's something that that the team has been pursuing through the implementation of improvements to the technology that is used to separate the waste. And also there's more and more conversation to work together with industry to improve this. In terms of the detail behind this, Raquel, I'm not yet, I don't have any detail or specific projects that have been underway. And unfortunately, Kevin has not been able to rejoin the call yet. So I'll have to ask Kevin to maybe share some information afterwards to address this open question. Hannah, okay. How did how did you manage team members' stress due to additional workload when they kicked off the Kaizen project? So because of the pressure that the business was under because of a financial loss, I would say that all the complete team was already under a bit of stress. So a lot of the stress a lot of the effort that already existed, we tried to channel it into the right focus points and activities. There has been a lot of discussions, or a lot of management of the speed of the project, and what would be focal points that we had to go through to adjust what we were doing. And one of the key elements to this has been that we used a monthly meeting, a steering meeting, to actually do a check with the team. Where are we compared to what we wanted to achieve, and how fast can we go? In some monthly steering meetings, we noticed that some topics we should drop, or we should adjust the effort to maintain the focus on what was important. In some other months, we noticed that we could just accelerate and focus on getting even more benefits to try and cover the gap that we were aiming to reduce even quicker. So what happened was, that's part of the reason why we actually achieved a greater benefit than we were initially also targeting, because throughout the complete process we are constantly challenging the project plan, both against the resource availability that we had, as well as, did we find any more opportunities that we should run after? Should we adjust our focus as well? So the change of the disposal location was an obstacle that popped up, and due to this governance structure that we had in place, we were also quick to adjust to and just continue to drive improvements. I think there's no more questions. So I would like to thank Kevin very much for his availability. It's a shame that he couldn't really help with answering all of these questions. I hope I managed to answer them well enough. And I would like to thank everyone that has joined this webinar call. All of the questions as well, very good questions. And I look forward to also continuing to work with Renewi and what the future might hold, because there's a lot more that can be done in the future. And continuous improvement is a culture, it's a way of life. So this is, of course, we continue to stay in touch with Renewi and support wherever we can. And we are very proud of what Renewi has achieved in the Elwa contract, I have to say. Good. Thank you very much, everyone. I wish you all a nice day, and I wish you all the best of luck in your continuous improvement journeys. Thank you.